My girlfriend and I were staying at a cabin in Hocking Hills, Ohio in August of 2024. It was a 2-night trip for her birthday, and we didn't have any real plans other than finding a couple of hikes and visiting a local dark sky park that was 20 minutes from where we were staying. This had been sort of a last-minute thing, so we were mostly winging it. On the night we went to the astronomy park, we spent an hour or two looking at the stars, then left to go back to our cabin. There were almost no other cars around, and once we left the park, it felt like we were alone. That whole area is beautiful during the day, but at night it's a completely different place. The roads are narrow with sharp curves, and you never really know what's over the next hill or around the next corner. While we were driving toward town, I was taking it pretty slow, and my girlfriend had been trying to figure out which trail she wanted to go to in the morning. We came up over a small hill, and my headlights hit something in the road that was probably 200 or 300 feet in front of us. My immediate reaction was to hit the brakes because I thought it was a person, and they were standing in the middle of the road right in front of this old abandoned church. I slowed way down as we got closer, and it genuinely looked like a small woman crouched down and hunched over like she was picking something up off the ground. My heart jumped because this was a crazy thing to see out there late at night, and it scared the hell out of me. The second my car came to a stop, she stood up and looked directly at us, and I still have that image burned into my memory. In this split second of time, she was in plain sight, and it looked like her body was wrapped in a white skin-tight bodysuit, including her head and face. We couldn't see any facial features, and there was no hair or skin showing. It was just white from head to toe. Within probably 2 seconds of stopping the car, she turned toward the church and ran, and it was at a full sprinting speed. We watched her run up toward the doors and then go around the back side of it, and she was gone. Both of us were totally freaked out and trying to understand why someone would be out there in the middle of the road at night and dressed like that. Then something clicked in the rational part of my brain, and I thought it had to be a prank. I told my girlfriend, and she agreed because it felt like a prank, and right away I wondered if we were being filmed. I pictured someone setting the whole thing up and scaring people as they drove by. That thought took the shock and fear away, but it also made me wonder if we were going to end up online somewhere. I slowly started driving again and pulled up right in front of the church. I didn't want to stop completely because I thought someone might still run out and try to scare us, but we were barely creeping by. The church had been on my girlfriend's side of the car, and she rolled her window down, I think just to see if we could hear anybody talking or laughing. It was totally dark and silent outside other than the sound of the car. Then something happened that couldn't possibly be a prank. Instantly and at the same exact time, 2 massive lights lit up the church. These were not headlights or floodlights or anything close to that. They were huge, like giant old-school spotlights or something you'd see lighting up a monument. There was one on each side of the church, and they were shining down from above and at an angle, lighting up the entire building and the ground around it. We had no idea what we were looking at, and it was blindingly bright compared to how dark it had been just seconds before. The next 2 things happened simultaneously. I hit the gas pedal to leave purely out of reflex. Then, because my girlfriend's window was still wide open, we heard the most god-awful alien sound I have ever heard. It was like a deep pulsing horn sound, and there is literally nothing I can compare it to. It was so powerful and low that it made my mirrors vibrate. At that point, I wasn't even thinking, I just drove. I didn't care what direction we were going or what road we were on. It was a pure terror response. My girlfriend was turned almost all the way around in her seat and looking out the back window while telling me to drive faster. As we drove away, I could still see the brightness in my rearview mirror. Then before we could even get around the first corner, my girlfriend said the lights went off, and just like that, it was pitch dark again. Because I had been so focused on the road, the only thing I remember was her frantically yelling, "What was that, Kevin? And I want to go home." She could barely sit in her seat and was so scared, and I don't blame her. I didn't have a clue what had happened. I just kept driving, and faster than anyone should be going on that road. The drive back to the cabin felt like it was never going to end. It took forever to get there, and when we finally did, we couldn't stop talking about it. Whatever it was that we saw completely took over the rest of our trip. My girlfriend was visibly shaken by it, and I felt the same way. She was then and still is now completely convinced that we saw an alien being in front of the church, and she thinks the lights we saw came from whatever brought it here. I hate to say it because I've never really believed in that stuff, but I can't argue with her because it was so unreal. There was nothing out where we were, and there'd be no reason for massive spotlights to suddenly turn on and light up an abandoned church like that in the middle of nowhere, and that's not even taking into account the figure we saw on the road. We really debated going to the police about it, but decided not to since it wasn't technically an emergency, and we don't really know if we were in any actual danger. My girlfriend did call the Hocking County Sheriff's Office non-emergency line though, just to let them know what happened. When I think back about it now, it feels like someone or something was either trying to get us to stop, or we accidentally stumbled into a situation we weren't supposed to see. I am a realist though, and I guess there's still the slightest possibility it was a giant elaborate prank and we were the victims, but that seems too impossible. It would have required unbelievably big lights set up at least 100 feet high on cranes and a massive sound system to pull off the noise we heard. We never went back up there in the daytime to check, but I can't imagine that'd be the case. I can't emphasize enough how scary this was, and it couldn't have been more unexpected since we had been having such a nice, relaxing getaway. Even when it comes up now, I get chills, and my girlfriend doesn't even talk about it. If we were the guinea pigs in some outrageous, scary prank, I wish I could find out about it, because at least then I'd know it wasn't real. My name is Phil, and my wife and I spend a lot of our time traveling in our RV. We're both in our 70s and retired and have always loved camping and being outdoors. Since we're too old for tents now, it was a priority for us to get the RV when I stopped working. We have a 4x4 rig that is capable off-road, and it can also be off-grid for days at a time, which is how we like to camp about half the time. The other half we stay in established campgrounds and RV parks. 2 years ago, we were down in Taos, New Mexico and stopped for one night in Cibola Mesa Campground in the Carson National Forest. We got the best spot out of only 5 sites they have available, and it was not only on the edge of the canyon with an amazing view, but there was no one else camping that night. We had the whole place to ourselves. We got there in the afternoon, and after setting up camp, we made dinner. Then as the sun went down, we set our chairs outside and made first night mojitos, which is just something we do at every new camp, weather permitting. It was an unseasonably warm night with no wind and a moon bright enough to walk around under. There also wasn't a cloud in the sky. We had been sitting right on the side of our RV and talking when we saw something moving across the sky that had come into view from behind the camper. I thought it was a cloud at first until my wife asked what it was. That made me take a better look, and I realized it wasn't clouds. There were 4 rings moving slowly across the sky together. They were shaped like donuts and honest to God looked exactly like giant smoke rings made with very thick smoke. They didn't even look like solid objects, just 4 huge rings that were clearly visible because of the bright moonlight. What was amazing is that you could see straight through the center of each one, and really I think a donut is the most accurate analogy of what these looked like. They didn't seem that high up either. I'd say somewhere between 3,000 and maybe 5,000 feet up, low enough to where we could easily make out their shape. I've been camping and hunting for 65 years in every kind of weather imaginable, and they weren't like anything I've ever seen. As if this weren't strange enough on its own, we noticed something else. All 4 of these rings were moving together like they were part of one larger thing, and about every 30 seconds they would get a little bit bigger, like each one was puffing itself up. We could see them noticeably expand for a second, then slowly retract and thin out before doing it again. My wife thought it looked like they were breathing, and they did this the whole time. We had to get out of our chairs to watch because it was so incredible. If they wouldn't have been in such perfect shapes, I would have thought they were clouds since they had that same vapor quality, but there hadn't been a single cloud in the sky all night. They were also too defined and evenly spaced for that. Nothing I know of can create perfect cloud rings like that in an otherwise clear sky. I would say they traveled 4 or 5 miles over the few minutes we were watching, and it finally dawned on my wife that we should be getting a video of what we were seeing. She went into the RV to get her phone and I stayed outside. Then, in what I still consider to be the worst timing ever, the ring that had been in the front looked like it hit an invisible layer in the sky and completely dissipated into nothing. It wasn't very dramatic, it just faded out like it ran into a trough of different air pressure and evaporated. Right after the first one, the two behind it did the same thing in the same spot, and both of those evaporated together. Finally, when my wife came back out with her phone, we were both able to see the last ring fade, and she never even got the chance to turn her phone on. It's so unfortunate we weren't able to document anything, but I mostly blame that on two factors. The first is because it all happened pretty fast and we hadn't even thought about getting a picture or video for several minutes after seeing them. And I think the second is because we're old and we just forget we have cameras with us. Maybe it's the 60+ years we lived without technology, but I still only use my cell phone for phone calls and have never done anything else on it. My wife uses hers more than I do, but it's still a very small amount, and we never carry our phones on us. After the rings were gone, the sky went right back to being clear, and it left us wondering what could have caused something like that to happen. We ended up staying outside that night for at least 2 more hours. We mostly kept our eyes on the sky, although we did make one more round of mojitos hoping we'd see something else, but that was the end of the show. It was clear skies until we went to bed. I have described what we saw to some of our friends and talked to other campers we've run into, and my wife even put the question out there on a Facebook RV group she's part of. It seems like the only replies we get are about cloud formations, and the thing is, I know it wasn't clouds. Anyone who would have seen them would immediately know they weren't clouds, so I have yet to hear a good explanation. I consider what we saw to be a true unidentifiable sighting. I've also wanted to share this since it happened because I've never heard anyone else describe seeing anything like it. It really feels like we caught a one-of-a-kind thing, and as amazing as it was to see, we're kind of just stuck wondering what in the world it could have been. When I was 8 years old, my mom and I took an Amtrak train from Martinez, California up to Washington to visit my aunt and uncle in Seattle. I barely remember the overall trip because I was so young, and I know childhood memories can be unreliable, but something happened on that train that was right out of a movie, and it came around again when I was an adult. The train is one of the few memories I have at all from that age, actually, and I think it's stuck because of how badly it scared me. This is what happened, and I'll try to include as much detail as I can. Somewhere along the line, we were going through Northern California right next to Mount Shasta, and it was late in the day, either very late afternoon or close to nighttime. It wasn't completely dark yet, so we could still see the mountain out the windows. I had the window seat with my mom next to me, and I was bored and watching the scenery go by. Mount Shasta is a huge mountain, and from whatever side the train goes around, it looked like the highest part of it was on the left, then it had a dip or a saddle in the middle, and another smaller butte part came up on the right. While I was staring out the window, I saw some kind of object fly out of the lower saddle part. When I think back on this, I swear it came out of the actual mountain itself, though I'll admit now that I don't know if that was right or if it had come from behind or the side of it, but as a kid I was convinced it flew right out of the side. The object was small compared to the mountain, but it stood out clearly and it looked like a big grain of rice. I didn't see any wings or lights, but I watched it fly around in the air by the lower part of the mountain for a few minutes, mostly staying on the shorter side. Then it changed direction and started coming toward the train. I remember this happening very fast too. It covered a significant distance in what felt like a few seconds. One moment it was all the way over by the mountain, and the next it was virtually above us and looked much bigger. When this happened, I turned away from the window to tell my mom, and at that exact second, all the power in the lights went out on the train. The whole car was dark instantly, and I could only see the dim light outside the windows. I don't even remember hearing the sound of the train after that. At the same time I turned around, I saw that my mom was out of her seat and it was empty. This made me panic and I jumped out into the aisle. Then when I was looking down the aisle, I realized there was no one in any of the seats. I didn't see a single other person on the train. I ran down yelling for my mom, and I could see people's bags and personal things still sitting on the seats. The entire car was dark and empty, and it seemed like I was the only one there. I ended up going all the way down to the end of the car, shouting for my mom and totally terrified. I don't think I had ever felt scared like that before. I was a little kid alone on a dark train in the middle of nowhere, and I had no idea what was going on. I don't know why I chose to do this, but I ran back to where our seats were and got into one of the bathrooms. I think I was just trying to hide. I remember trying to close the door, but I kept fumbling with the handle and couldn't get it to lock. While I was panicking, the power came back on and the bathroom lit up, so I opened the door. Everything on the train looked normal again, and the people were sitting in their seats like nothing had happened. My mom was even back in her seat, exactly where she had been before all of this happened. The only other thing I can remember is running over to her from the bathroom and crying. I have brought this up a couple of times with my mom, and she says I fell asleep in my seat and had a bad dream about everyone on the train being gone. I don't know what actually happened, and back then I wasn't old enough to articulate what I had experienced, but it's always felt real to me, and it really traumatized me. I've also never understood how I could have been dreaming, because I could swear I walked back to our seats from the train bathroom when I was crying. I remember doing that. Either way, the rest of our trip was fine apparently, but I really have no memory of it. Way later in life, my wife and I were on vacation with our 2 kids. This was in 2022, so my son was 5 and my daughter was 2, and we were driving up to Oregon to stay in a little resort town called Sun River and also to see Crater Lake National Park. We had just gone through Weed, California on Highway 97 and going past Mount Shasta. It was around 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a beautiful hot summer day. I was on autopilot and my wife was next to me when out of nowhere my son started screaming from the back seat, and I mean real panic screaming. It scared the hell out of me and we both thought something was seriously wrong. I immediately pulled over onto the side of the highway. My wife got out and opened his door because he was sitting behind her on that side of the car, then took him out of his car seat and tried to calm him down. Between his crying and rapid breathing, he started saying that he saw something big over our car. Then he started saying it got really dark and we were all gone and he was by himself in the back seat. I think it was hard for him to explain because he was 5, but I can tell you when I heard him say that we were gone and he was alone in the car, I almost felt my heart stop beating. That made my own memories come back from being on the train with my mom, and it was like he'd had the exact same experience. I couldn't even say anything. I just sat in the driver's seat while my wife held him and kept calming him down. It was a 90-degree day with bright sun and we were on a major highway, which made it even weirder. It wasn't like we were driving down some dark road at night. My wife eventually talked him down and he went back to his seat. After that, we just got on the road and finished our vacation, but I was so distracted that it kind of put a damper on the whole trip, at least for me anyway. What really messed with me was that his whole episode happened right by Mount Shasta, so not only did he have an experience just like I did when I was a kid, but it was in virtually the same location. I kept everything to myself until a couple of weeks after we got home, then finally talked to my wife about what had happened in the car. She had all but forgotten about it. I had never told her the story from when I was on the train, so I explained everything and told her how similar it was to what our son had been saying. She definitely acknowledged the coincidence, but has never connected the two the way I do. To her, our son fell asleep on a road trip and had a bad dream, and it just so happened to resemble something that happened to me when I was young. That was basically the end of our conversation. That trip was 3.5 years ago, and my son is almost 9 years old now. I've talked to him about this privately, mostly trying to get more details, and while he still remembers it happening, it's broken up and not very clear. I wish he would have been just a little older so he remembered more. He says he never saw anything come out of the mountain like I did, but he also says there was definitely something big over our car, and it had been so big that it got dark inside the car. The main thing he remembers was the rest of us not in the car and being alone in the back seat. That part is still very clear to him. That's basically the whole story, or as much as I've been able to put together thus far. So either something identical and totally unexplainable happened to me and my son in almost the same geographical location, or it is the craziest coincidence of bad dreams I've ever heard of. I want to thank everyone for watching another episode of Skywatcher Stories. If you like hearing these personal experiences of strange sightings and alien encounters, please subscribe because I upload new episodes every week and it really helps the channel. Until next time, keep watching the skies